Hey guys, I'm Jessie and welcome to my channel. So I have a lot of yarn that I need to go through. I moved a while ago, to be completely honest, but it led to this disaster of a yarn bucket. But when I was looking at it, it made me think about what I wanted to talk about in this video, which is the overconsumption of yarn. If you are a part of the fiber arts community, I'm sure you have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say a yarn stash, yarn hauls, and just the overconsumption and overbuying of yarn that you don't need. I'm not judging anyone because I've fallen victim to it myself, hence this giant bucket of yarn. But I just kind of wanted to talk about it because I've been doing some reflecting and it made me think about my consumption of yarn, and I don't know. I wanted to share my thoughts and just what I've been thinking about when it comes to yarn and how I'm going to be buying yarn in the future. My goal is to kind of work on untangling and eventually winding up all of this yarn while I'm talking to you guys. Definitely won't get through it all, but I figured while I'm talking about yarn and having too much, it's a good time to untangle this giant mess of yarn that I have. So I have been crocheting for several years now. I don't remember exactly when I started. I think it was in high school, but one of my friends had started crocheting and I had done it a little bit when I was younger, and she had just started getting into it. She had done it some when she was younger too, but she was, sending pictures of the stuff that she was working on, and it just made me really want to get back into crocheting. And so I went to Joann Fabrics with her and picked out some yarn. And I remember at Joann's going in and not really having an idea of what I wanted to make, like what the project was I was going to be working on, but just wanting to get yarn. And so we went in, I got a crochet hook and then a bunch of just cheap acrylic yarn in a few different colors. So I went home with this yarn that I had bought and, started to crochet and look up patterns and play around, just learning how to do all the different stitches, making granny squares, this and that, just like kind of getting the hang of things. But the yarn I had bought was the cheapest yarn that they had, the super cheap, I think it's like, it's the Red Heart Super Saver, the giant skeins of the cheap acrylic yarn. And so as I'm working with it, it's like falling apart, it feels like plastic, it's all fuzzy, and it just wasn't great. And so I was like, well, this won't do if I'm gonna be making stuff. And so I put that aside and we went back to the store and I bought some nicer yarn, still acrylic, but again, with no project in mind. It was just like, let me buy a bunch of yarn, a million colors. I still have several skeins of that yarn that are virtually unused because I, again, bought it with nothing in mind. I just wanted to start crocheting, and so I felt the need to just buy a bunch of yarn for no reason. And I think that's like one of the first problems that I know I've experienced and that I see a lot online with people is just buying yarn for the sake of having yarn. You go to Michael's, you go to Joann Fabrics or Hobby Lobby, and the yarn is 30, 40, 50% off. And so you just buy a bunch for no reason. You don't have any projects in mind, you're just doing it because the yarn is there. And so I think for me, one of my goals this year, sorry, my cat, one of my goals this year, and just like for the future of me crocheting, and I've been getting into knitting as well, is to stop buying yarn without intention. If I am going to be buying yarn, I need to have the pattern in mind that I want to do, or the project. I have to have an idea of why I'm buying this yarn and what I want to make with it so that I'll actually end up using it. Another thing that I was thinking about, again, with just how much yarn I have, is that this is all perfectly good yarn. Well, You know, a lot of it is acrylic, and I've been kind of looking into moving away from the synthetic yarns. It's still perfectly good yarn and can be used in so many ways. So I think another one of my goals is just to use the yarn I have before I buy more. So whether that means looking at the yarn I have and coming up with projects based on the yarn that I have, you know, trying to design future patterns for my website around the patterns or around the yarn that I have, instead of like buying yarn for the pattern like I said earlier. But I think that's something I'm gonna try to get a little bit better at. My goal really is to use up as much of this massive pile of yarn as I can before I buy more. But you know, if you're creative, I think you can make pretty much any yarn work for any project. Something else in the future, I mentioned it a little bit, is I plan to just kind of try to move away from synthetic fibers. And I know that that's not easy or accessible or realistic for everybody because natural fibers can be incredibly expensive and acrylic is so much cheaper. But for me, I think that price point will also help me be more intentional with my yarn purchases. And we're in a time right now where overconsumption is just the norm. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about Shein and fast fashion and all of that stuff, and I don't think that, you know, buying acrylic yarn is the exception. I think people will say, oh, well, I'm not participating in fast fashion because I'm making my clothes. I'm crocheting my own clothes. I'm not buying from Shein. I'm buying the yarn and making it myself. But I think we also have to step back and ask ourselves, where is this yarn coming from? What is the environmental impact of the yarn that I'm buying, especially when I have a ridiculous amount that I'm never going to use? Especially when you consider the impact that acrylic yarn has on the environment. And I know that not all natural fibers are immediately ethical just because they're natural fibers. I mean, it's important to be aware of where the natural fibers you're buying are coming from as well, to buy with intention and consideration. And so I think just moving forward in my career and my journey as a fiber artist, I think intention and thought behind everything is one of my biggest goals. I also think something I want to do moving forward is sell some of the projects that I make. Not everything. You know, I've flirted with and experimented with selling things made to order, and it was incredibly exhausting for me. I know it works really well for a lot of people, you know, having an Etsy and selling things made to order and getting hundreds of orders and grinding away and stuff, but when I did try that, it didn't work for me. I ended up kind of hating crocheting and needing to take a break for a really long time. And, you know, falling out of love with something that once was my favorite thing in the world. I tried to make an Etsy where I sold these beanies made to order, and all of a sudden, the last thing I wanted to do was crochet. I have a lot of stuff that I make because, you know, I've gotten back into crocheting and I love making things, but it's not always stuff I'm gonna wear, you know, and I want to be able to do something with it and make a profit off of crocheting, but I don't want to burn myself out. And so I think one of the goals I have is to, when I make things, just list them as I make them with no goals in mind for how many I'm gonna make or how many are gonna be in stock. I'm just gonna make what I make and sell that. If I make a beanie and I personally don't think I'll really wear it much, go ahead and list that on Depop or Etsy and see if it sells, so that I can make the things I love to make and get joy out of that and write these patterns and test them and make things, but also be able to move on with the items and not hoard them forever like I love to do. I mean, half of what's in this bin is things that I made that I don't use. Yeah, so I think my biggest goal moving forward in 2025 and beyond as a fiber artist is just, like I said, to be more mindful and considerate and just being more aware of what I'm doing, why I'm buying what I'm buying, where the yarn I'm buying is coming from, the impact it has on the environment, asking myself if I need it or if I'll use it, and just being more intentional. I think another thing that I can't be alone in is that I need to get better at just admitting defeat and frogging projects that I'm not going to finish so that that yarn can get used. I have so many, like I said, half-finished projects, and it could be so much good, usable yarn if I would just take them apart. Yeah, that was just kind of, you know, my 2 cents on yarn and overconsumption. How many times did I say that? And, you know, the crocheter and knitter and fiber artist that I want to be moving forward. And, you know, I would love to hear from you guys and kind of your goals moving forward as a fiber artist, or, you know, whatever kind of crafter you are. Just your goals for moving forward and who you want to become. Yeah, so I'll catch you guys in the next video.